Coming up, events are booming as multiple events come to Iowa City. And a big change is on the way for Iowa schools.
A disaster in Baltimore rocks the nation.
That and a profile on a newly appointed vice presidential pick, along with important dates this week in history, making sure your facts are straight.
Also, where presidential candidates are during their campaign trails, the latest from polls, and something for you to consider.
Good evening and welcome to The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we're keeping you up to date. I'm Jordan Tovar.
And I'm Johnny Valtman. And starting it here, Jordan, everybody on the staff seemed to be working on this story these past couple of days.
Yeah, Johnny, we've certainly been keeping busy, and it has been a big week both on campus around the Iowa City area for politics. The Young Americans for Freedom held a speaker that was met with protest. Senator Chuck Grassley came to the area to talk with locals, and that was just on Monday. Also, an Iowa City elementary school will be closing at the end of the year. I covered the protest outside while Johnny went to the YAF event inside. Jayce Bertrand covered Senator Grassley, and Cara Dulin was at the pivotal school board meeting.
The Young Americans for Freedom at the University of Iowa's newest guest speaker made her way to the Iowa Memorial Union with an anticipation of a large crowd, but when the doors closed, only around 60 people were in the Black Box Theater.
Like this, having more protesters come in, sit in our events, and then also, getting to engage more in Q&A.
Scanlon is a former collegiate swimmer who was teammates of a trans athlete. Her argument against trans athletes in sports involves the uncomfortable feelings of female athletes around former men, the alleged competitive disadvantages created by transgender individuals, and Scanlon's belief that men are men and women are women.
It is a very long, prolonged, vulnerable experience where you are completely naked, and to introduce men into that situation is unacceptable.
Ultimately, the message she is preaching is the one of, how God created the world.
Protesters were present inside the event, jeering at what they didn't agree with, correcting the pronouns of transgender individuals mentioned, and testing Scanlon's opinions on the topic during the Q&A.
The most exciting Q&A that we've had. So it was really cool to be a part of that.
And while Scanlon talked here in the Black Box Theater, protesters began to arrive outside. That's where Jordan Tovar is, where he is learning more about the protest.
I'm here outside the Iowa Memorial Union, where protesters have gathered against YAF Speaker Paula Scanlon, even on a cold and rainy night like this.
Luckily, it's kind of died down a little bit, but just because, honestly, we can't allow people who are going to just obviously try to be like, oh, these people shouldn't exist or don't exist, to just continue speaking like that.
The organizer of the protest wanted to keep things peaceful as compared to previous events so their voice could be heard.
I wanted us to just be able to have our message and tell our message to everybody without getting cops involved, without it getting violent or reckless.
As night fell, so did more rain, but demonstrators didn't want to let it wash out their messages of support for trans people.
The university upholds love and respect, and I just feel like for there to be giving them a platform for hateful speaker just doesn't uphold what's in the conduct. Now the event has ended and protesters have dispersed, but elsewhere in Iowa City, more political events were going on. So I'll send it over to DITV's Jayce Bertrand, who interviewed Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley.
Senator Chuck Grassley made a stop in Iowa City as part of his yearly goal to visit all 99 counties in Iowa.
Government's supposed to be a service for the American people, and you can't serve the American people if you aren't in business.
For this year's visit, Grassley met with members of Greater IC Inc., a coalition of over 180 businesses and interest groups in the Iowa City area. Meeting here at the Merge building, Senator Grassley and members of Greater IC Incorporated discussed a wide variety of topics, from immigration to budget to Social Security. At the private meeting, Greater IC board members were given a chance to share their concerns and hopes for Iowa's future.
I really appreciated that he was willing to do that, but also and not shy away from tough topics or the challenges in Washington.
Grassley plans to take these discussions into consideration when he returns to work in Washington. From the Merge building in downtown Iowa City, Jayce Bertrand, DITV.
126 students in the Iowa City Community School District will be headed to new schools in the fall, as Hills Elementary School will be closed permanently at the end of the year. The unanimous decision was reached by ICCSD board members despite pleas from community members not to close the school.
Those children are each other's family. They support each other, they take care of each other, they know each other.
Members of the Latino community in Hills were particularly concerned because they're worried their students won't find the same resources and community at other schools.
Esta noche el Distrito Escolar de Iowa City tiene la oportunidad de cambiar el futuro no solo de la comunidad latina, pero también de la comunidad entera de Hills.
The district projects they'll save about $1.6 million in the next fiscal year by closing Hills. Students will be bused to nearby schools, but as of yet, there is no solid plan on how that's going to happen. From the ICCSD building, Cara Dulin, DITV.
Now, Johnny, there's always a lot going on around the area locally, but there's been some pretty big news around the state this week.
Yes, Jordan, and while the local sections seem to be a bit stacked, there's still more going on throughout the state, and that's why we're going to be bringing in Cara Dulin, fresh off the school board, and she's got more about what's going on in Des Moines.
Thanks, Johnny. Iowa lawmakers have reached a final deal to overhaul the state's area education agencies, or AEAs. The Senate approved the amended House File 2612 in a 30-18 vote on Tuesday, sending it off for approval by Governor Reynolds. With this bill, the state's 9 AEAs will continue receiving 90% of special education funding, but individual districts will be entirely in charge of all money from media and general education services beginning in the 2025-2026 school year. In spite of the majority support for this bill, not everyone was a fan. The bill is opposed by Democrats and AEA workers in particular.
I've followed all of the debate on this bill. I think about how we have continued to shortchange our students, shortchange our children throughout the state of Iowa.
Investing in strong public schools is an investment in our children, in our workforce, in the health of our communities, from the smallest towns to the biggest cities. But this proposal refuses to make that investment.
The bill also came under fire from some Democrats for not being what they call a single subject bill. This means that it had many issues rolled into one proposal, so if people wanted to pass on one aspect, they had to pass on them all. In addition to changing AEA funding, the bill will raise starting teacher pay from $33,500 a year to $50,000 a year. It will also increase state per pupil aid to students by 2.5%. Governor Reynolds was unbothered by the backlash from Democrats, saying in a statement, quote, "Change is seldom easy, but it is necessary to achieve better results. Reforming the AEA system creates accountability, transparency, consistency, and most importantly, better outcomes for all Iowa students." Jordan and Johnny, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Cara. And Jordan, I feel a snowball effect coming on here because it's been busy locally, statewide, and just looking at the recent headlines, I'm sure Jayce is going to have a lot of national news.
Yeah, Johnny, and that snowball effect, it's putting it lightly. So we're going to send it to DITV's Jayce Bertrand in the newsroom to give us a rundown on everything that's been happening recently.
Thanks, guys, and yeah, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get right into it. To start, the Senate passed a spending bill on Monday night that just narrowly avoided a government shutdown. In a 7-24 vote, the $1.2 trillion bill passed through the Senate to head to President Biden's desk for signing. 70% of the budget will be going to defense, a decision made by a heavily divided House. And next, we're going to head to Russia, where a terrorist attack has rocked the nation. Last Friday, gunmen stormed the Crocus City Hall in Moscow, firing at civilians before setting the building on fire. 140 died in the attack and 80 more were injured, making this the deadliest attack in Russia in nearly 20 years. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack, and 4 suspects have been arrested and charged for them. And finally, we're going to head back to the United States to talk about the recent bridge collapse in Baltimore. Early Tuesday morning, a cargo ship struck the pillar of Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, causing it to collapse. The state of the emergency has been addressed in Baltimore, and 6 people are still missing from the collapse. While the Baltimore port has remained open, the flow of ships has greatly been impacted. And all of us here are hoping and praying that the 6 missing individuals are found safe. I'm now going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce. And you know, after months of deliberation and anticipation, we finally have the announcement of a vice presidential pick, Johnny.
Yes, Jordan, and we've been covering this candidate very closely, and we're all very excited to see who we picked, and we finally got that answer on Tuesday. And as we promised this week, we have a full profile on newly appointed vice presidential candidate running alongside independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Nicole Shanahan. Shanahan was born on September 16, 1985, and grew up in Oakland, California. Shanahan described her childhood as filled with traumatic experiences. Her father suffered from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and her mother was a maid in China before becoming an accountant. She first attended college at St. Mary's College of California before moving to Washington State and finishing her undergrad studies at the University of Puget Sound, where she studied Asian studies, economics, and Mandarin. She would work as a paralegal and patent specialist, then attending and graduating Santa Clara University School of Law in 2014. Out of school, Shanahan founded and was the CEO of her own company, Clear Access IP, a legal tech company. She would sell the company off in 2020. The same year, she would receive an executive producer credit for the film Kiss the Ground. She'd receive the same credit for a 2022 film, Evolver. With her wealth, she's also donated to major organizations and charities to fight climate change, reproductive health, and social justice. During the 2020 presidential election, she would donate to candidates Pete Buttigieg and Marianne Williamson. When President Biden won the nomination, she donated more money to him. She has also been a large contributor to Kennedy's campaign while he was on the Democratic ticket and now on the independent ticket. Notably, she funneled in $4 million for the controversial Super Bowl ad for the presidential candidate. Yesterday, she was announced as RFK Jr.'s running mate at an event in Oakland, California. She beat out other rumored candidates, including Jesse Ventura and Tulsi Gabbard, for the role.
I wanted someone with a spiritual dimension and compassion and idealism, and above all, a deep love for the United States of America.
It is his commitment to peace and to the welfare of hardworking people in America that draw me as a person of compassion to his candidacy.
If the ticket makes it to the White House, she would become the second youngest vice president ever appointed to the office. Also, something to note, she has never held public office. And Jordan, with this now, 2 of the 3 main presidential candidates have a vice president. We're still waiting on one more. But the other presidential candidates, they are making their rounds.
You know, they're making their rounds around the country, Johnny, and I'm just kind of curious to how they're doing. So we're going to send it back to Cara Dulin, who has updates on the campaign trail.
Thanks, Jordan. President Joe Biden's 2024 presidential campaign will feature a few special guest stars this week. 2 former presidents will hold an event in New York tomorrow to raise money for the Biden Victory Fund. Tickets start at $250 but go well into the ranges of hundreds of thousands of dollars for things like pictures and reception with the presidential group. Talk show host Stephen Colbert will chat with the trio, and there will be musical performances and possibly even a podcast tied to the event. The Biden Victory Fund National Finance Chair Chris Corge says it will be, quote, the biggest fundraising event that Joe Biden has ever done in his political career, unquote. Trump also has resorted to some creative ways to raise money. He's urging his supporters to buy his God Bless the USA Bible ahead of Easter Sunday for $60. It's no $100,000 photo with 3 presidents, but hey, Trump has to get creative if he wants to manage his ever-mounting charges and legal bills. Although a New York appeals court did agree to hold off on collecting the more than $454 million he owes, as long as he puts up $175 million in the next 10 days. So basically, all he has to do is just sell just under 3 million Bibles, and he'll be all covered on that front, easy peasy. We'll be sure to bring you an update on Biden's fundraiser next week, along with one on Trump's legal troubles, but for now, I'll send it back to Jordan and Johnny.
Thanks, Cara. And Jordan, while the presidential candidates, they're out doing their campaigns, the pollers, they're heading to the polls and letting the presidential candidates know what they want.
Yeah, you know, it's just been kind of like redundant just hearing all the time about Trump this, Biden that, but I'm just curious, what do the people actually want him to do? So we'll send it to DITV's Grace Lathrop, who has our poll watch this week.
Thanks, guys. Looking beyond just the candidates, recent polls have shown what issues voters are prioritizing when casting their final vote. Latest polls taken in February have shown that the most pressing issues for voters is inflation and prices. About 20% of voters say this is the topic they will keep in mind the most when casting their vote, as inflation rates are currently at 3.2%, whereas in 2020, before Biden's presidency, they were at 1.4%. Voters are most concerned with prices in regards to groceries, food items, rent, and electric utilities they use on a daily basis. Healthcare is closely trailing behind at 14% in pressing issues that voters will most consider, specifically when discussing its prices and availability. With these issues in mind, favorability polls are switching up by the week. As of March 22nd, Joe Biden is now 51% unfavorable and 46% favorable in the eyes of voters. Donald Trump has recently polled higher in favorability, coming in at 50% favorable and 45% unfavorable as of March 22nd. These polls could be a game changer for the upcoming election, and with issues like inflation and healthcare, it is important to keep a lookout to see which candidates value these issues as much as you do. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Grace. Now, you know, Johnny, I'm a pretty big history buff, and I'm always willing to learn more about that, so I'm hoping you can educate me a little bit today.
Yes, Jordan, I've got a variety of topics to get to, and first off, we're going to start off with on the afternoon of March 25th, 1911, this week in history, New York City would suffer one of the worst industrialization disasters in history. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, located on the 8th through 10th stories of the Ash Building, caught fire. The cause, while truly unknown, has been widely accepted as a lit cigarette being disposed of without being put out. Despite cigarettes being banned from the factory, employees would still sneak them in and smoke during their shifts. The doors on the inside were locked, a common practice at the time, leaving workers stranded. Onlookers quickly arrived to the scene, witnessing as workers jumped through windows to escape the blaze. In total, 123 females and 23 men perished in the blaze. In light of the tragedy, steps were taken that would shape modern work conditions. A committee of public safety, a factory investigating commission, and the American Society of Safety Professionals were all founded shortly after the event in New York City, and eventually similar staffs would form across the country, and we still see it to this day. And on this day, in 1979, the war between Egypt and Israel ended with a peace treaty. Stemming from the Camp David Accords back in the fall of 1978, many actions occurred to de-escalate tensions between the two countries. Israel withdrew its forces from the Sinai Peninsula, and Egypt agreed to leave the peninsula demilitarized. Israel was allowed passage through the Suez Canal, recognition of the Strait of Tiran and the Gulf of Aqaba as international waterways, ending Egypt's blockade of the two. The agreement also intended Israel to end their rule of their occupied territories and an establishment of full freedom of Palestinians in the territories. Those terms were not achieved and would lead to the Oslo Accords. Egypt also became the first Arab state to officially recognize Israel as a country, but it has been described as a cold peace. And a presidential roundup, Ronald Reagan was almost assassinated. Lyndon B. Johnson announced he wouldn't run for a second term. The 10th president of the United States, John Taylor, was born. Fun fact about him, he had 15 kids. And Jordan, while we were filming, news just came in that Joe Lieberman, the former senator and vice presidential candidate alongside Al Gore, just passed away. Thoughts go out to his family. And now coming back here to the update, with all this stuff going on, Jordan, there's going to be a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, you know, Johnny, for your This Week in History segment, I asked to be educated, and I'm feeling a little smarter than I did when I came in. But in the pursuit of my academic endeavors, I come across false information. So to dispel some of these myths, we have Jayce Bertrand in the newsroom for Fact Check.
Thanks, Jordan. And to start, I'd like to focus on that attack on Russia and the misinformation that's coming out of Moscow. Despite ISIS claiming responsibility for the attack, Russian President Vladimir Putin is claiming that the responsibility ultimately lies in the hands of Ukraine, stating that the attack, quote, is a link in a series of attempts of those who have been fighting Russia since 2014 with the hands of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. This, of course, is simply an attempt to justify Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine. In reality, U.S. intelligence had been warning Russia of an imminent attack from ISIS for weeks leading up to last Friday, but the warnings were not heeded. And now we're going to head back to Baltimore to take a look at some, quite honestly, disgusting rhetoric that's been emerging after the collapse. Pundits on apps such as Facebook and X have taken this tragedy as a chance to push hateful theories, such as that DEI programs were the cause of the collapse. However, the ship's parent company, Synergy Marine Group, is from Singapore, not the United States, so DEI programs have nothing to do with the hiring process. As of right now, a wide variety of individuals and programs have been blamed for the collapse, including but not limited to Joe Biden, Hamas, ISIS, Israel, Nickelodeon, P. Diddy, Barack Obama, aliens, Sri Lanka, Ukraine, India, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, Russia, China, Iran, vaccines, the CIA, immigrants, Jewish people, lockdowns, and wokeness. Despite what the current state of online political discourse wants us to believe, we know what caused the collapse. A shipping container lost power in the Baltimore port and uncontrollably drifted into the bridge's support pillar. It was a horrific accident, but an accident nonetheless. We live in a time where people online feel so horribly unexceptional that they need to come up with fake stories to fit narratives that justify their feelings of inadequacy or the chips on their shoulders. But remember, no matter how much you want to use a tragedy to justify your feelings, the facts will always prevail. And now I'm going to send back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce. And Jordan, now that you've got some history and you've got your facts straight, I think you've got something you'd like us to consider.
Yeah, Johnny, so a hot topic issue that's been at the forefront of American politics is that of immigration. Whether you agree or disagree on if the U.S. should close its borders or not, you cannot deny immigrant contributions to the United States. To show you how big of an impact immigrants could and do have on the country, I'll give you some population statistics. Currently, 46.2 million immigrants reside in the United States, and this equates to about 13.9% of the population. And of the 46.2 million, 10.7% are from Mexico. Immigrants have also contributed to some of the most important moments in the country's history. Irish and Chinese immigrants helped to build the Transcontinental Railroad, Italians helped with the Empire State Building, and 300,000 immigrants fought for the U.S. in World War II. But that was in the past, and this is now, so here are some current statistics. 64.1% of immigrants are more likely to be currently employed than those who were born in the U.S. And foreigners aren't just working menial jobs like those who like to stereotype them to be. They're working in fields that are critical for the country. 20% work in education and health services, 20% work in financials, and 16% work in professional services. So if the U.S. wants to continue boasting about economic growth, I suggest it takes the roles of immigrant within it to keep it going.
Thanks, Jordan, and we'd like to thank you for tuning in to the update tonight, where you'll find all your news and politics.
Tune in next week for more updates from the local level to the nationwide level.
From the update, I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Have a wonderful night.